And anyway, U.S. Congressman Mike Quigley is a Democrat from Illinois. He sits on the Intelligence Committee, and Greg Miller is a national security correspondent for the Washington Post. Gentlemen, thank you. You know, I'm trying to speculate, and I admit I'm speculating, but I'm thinking I'm Donald Trump, and I've just got up on a Saturday morning a few weeks ago, and I've tweeted that the president, the former president, wiretapped me during the campaign at Trump Tower. And then I realized I made a mistake, but I better get some backup for this. So, well, I talked to my people, Jared Kushner, my son-in-law, and Bannon, my guy, my consigliere, and I go, well, who do we have over that can give us something like that? And who can we feed that to on the Hill so that they will parrot for this? And they find out, well, we got this guy, Ezra Cohen, and we got this guy, Ellis, who used to work for Nunes, put this thing together. Congressman, it looks like it was an alley-oop play. I like to use that phrase. This is the way people, Dick Cheney used to do it. Give it to somebody else to deliver, and then you can say, as I was saying, they've got this guy, Nunes, pegged. They used him. They fed him stuff out of the White House one night. The next morning, he came back and announced it to the president with alarming news he'd just gotten from the president's people the night before. How do you see it yourself?
Yeah, I'm listening to the Three Stooges theme in the background, unfortunately. Yeah. It's extraordinarily troubling and frustrating. And at this point in time, the only thing we have is the opportunity to go forward. You know, I'm not giving up on the House investigation. There's a lot of good people over there. Clearly, we've had an extraordinarily tough week, and you know that there have been calls from Mr. Nunes to step aside. That's not going to happen, unfortunately. So we're going to work together, hopefully, and pivot and go back to regular order this week.
Do you trust him?
I think he's made it difficult for the investigation to go forward, but given that there are very few options, I don't have any choice. I'll tell you this. He was a very fair chairman under the Obama administration. It's been difficult this last week or so, especially since, obviously, President Trump took office. At this point in time, I wish I could say more. We have no choice. The Speaker isn't going to knock him off. He's not going to recuse himself. And the final analysis, we're going to be reading the same documents, and we have been. We're going to be interviewing the same witnesses. And I do believe we're going to have that open hearing, and I do believe we're going back to meetings with Admiral Rogers and Mr. Comey to find out exactly what took place.
Greg, it seems to me that when this thing is fully aired by the press and by the committee to some extent, but more by the press, we're going to see that the materials that were given to Mr. Nunes on Tuesday night last week were basically the ones they're going to be giving out now. But when they gave it to him in a special way, it was almost like giving an exclusive to a reporter. They're going to build it up and make it seem really alarming and news somehow exculpatory to the president, make the president look good on his Dawn Patrol tweets. I get the feeling it's not going to be that useful once it comes out in a normal fashion. What do you make of it? What's there?
Well, I think that's true. I think that the more we've learned about the documents, and we're still a long way from learning everything about them, it sounds less and less alarming, right? You back where Nunes started, which was very uncomfortable. Boy, the American public sure wouldn't like to see this stuff. Then he has a conversation with his Democratic counterpart, Adam Schiff, and Schiff says, boy, based on what Nunes told me when I pressed him on these issues, this was sort of standard operating procedure for intelligence agencies. I mean, there's a legitimate issue here on the unmasking of American officials who show up in the surveillance of foreign governments. But it's just sort of odd how the White House in this case has sort of used Nunes and damaged his credibility over such a seemingly minuscule matter, this tweet. You just sort of wonder whether Nunes is such an important ally for the administration, whether they might have wanted to preserve his credibility for more important developments later on in this Russia story.
Mr. Quigley, I think there's 3 cases in the last week where the White House's people have basically told us the story. First of all, there's Sean Spicer, whose job is to speak for the president, saying it doesn't pass the smell test if he got this stuff at the White House one night and shows up the next day to bring it back. Then there's Congressman Yoho from Florida, who basically said he works for the president. He said, Quigley, one of your colleagues, the chairman of your Intelligence Committee, works for the president. What do you make of these strange admissions and claims about the Constitution and what's going on? They seem to admit their own, like I said, they sound like their own worst witnesses.
Yeah, at this point, Mr. Spicer is channeling his inner Ron Ziegler. I think there's something beyond this that's more troubling. How this information was passed back and forth. Unfortunately, what's taking place here, besides the distraction, is the very real possibility that there are going to be investigations of what's happened during the investigation. And is that a distraction to the American public? It absolutely is. There's a lot of serious work to do on this, not the least of which is how do we prevent this sort of Russian involvement again? But we're not going to get there if we're playing these sort of crazy games.
Do you think Nunes wants to find out the Trump role in cooperating with the Russians, if there was one? Does he want to know what hand they played in encouraging the Russians to hack the Democratic National Committee, Podesta and Palmieri and all the rest of that seemed to be to destroy Hillary Clinton's campaign? Do you think that Nunes wants to find out the truth of the Trump role in all that?
I would like to think every American would like to find out the truth of exactly how far the Russian involvement what took place, who played a role in that, who, if anyone, was helping on the side of the United States, how far did this go, how do we prevent it in the future, and what about these leaks? That's the 4 levels of this investigation. Okay. I have to assume that they're going to work in good faith. Obviously, my doubts have been raised. We're going to keep a good eye on it and alert the American public. We've got a job to do. I can't let them succeed on the distractions. Otherwise, we're rewarding bad behavior. I have to make this investigation work.
Well said. Thank you, U.S. Congressman Mike Quigley.